Welcome to the Main Street Minute with equestrian marketing expert India Wilkinson. This is the destination for all things equestrian, from horse sales, breeding, horse health, and a look into the intricacies of the horse business world. Join India as she dives in with industry leaders to discuss the challenging and rewarding lifestyle of being in the equestrian world. And get ready for the Main Street Minute.
Hi there, this is India Wilkinson with the Main Street Minute, and today I am super excited to welcome Danielle Aamodt, who is a field agent for Marshall and Sterling Equine Insurance. And I just want to point out that I met Danielle on LinkedIn, and I do say this a lot because I think it's really important. Equestrians need to be using LinkedIn more. I have met some fabulous people on LinkedIn. So I don't really know how we connected, but we did. And then I put out into the world that we were looking for some great podcast guests and connected with Danielle. So I'm going to ask Danielle, who is a dynamic equestrian, and I know that she's done a lot of different things. So tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do with your equine insurance business.
Sure. Okay. Thank you, first of all, for having me on. I'm very excited to be here and to be having this conversation. So a very brief background on me. I was not born into the industry, so I had to work my way into it. I worked in barns for 10 years, and then that is when, after that, I wanted to kind of merge into more of the business side of the industry, and that's when I got my insurance license. So I started selling equine farm liability insurance about 10 years ago. And then after that, since this is more of a side gig for me, I have also done event management. I've worked for nonprofit programs, and I taught at Post University with their equine program for 4 years. I'm actually going to be building a new course for them this year.
Wow.
And I worked at USEF as the director of driving for about 6 years. So kind of done a lot of different things. After that, I actually moved on to the Mustang Heritage Foundation, and that's where I run programs and events now. And have that has led me into a lot of equine behaviorist work as well. So again, I do so many different things, or have done so many different things in the industry.
So I love that because you are clearly immersed in the equestrian world. And
Absolutely.
so today we're going to focus on the insurance part of it. I think that, well, I know this because as a horse owner, and I did have a farm, equine insurance can be really daunting. And unless you find someone that you really trust, it's really the person, I mean, insurance is insurance, and it's really the person that you connect with that can really help you. And there are some really fabulous insurance agents, and there's some that not so great. So just give us an overall kind of view of why it's important to have insurance on our horses and our farms.
Absolutely. Yeah, actually, one of the things that I like to pride myself on is communication. And I'm not saying I'm perfect at it, but I really do try to be available to my clients and communicate with them, and also teach them about the coverage that they're buying. And that is why it's so important, as you said, to have the right agent who can help you with your segment of the industry. As you may notice, a lot of agencies will kind of tunnel in on one segment of the industry.
Mhm.
There are some agencies that really insure mostly saddlebreds, and some will do sport horses, and some will do, there are different areas of the industry. The racetrack kind of has their own underwriters and coverages. So it's important to have an agent who understands your segment of the industry, whether it's your sport or whatever you're doing with that horse, because they'll know what questions to ask you and what information they need to get in order to make sure you're getting the right coverage. And then again, as I said, educating the insured, the client, on what their coverage does or does not cover. So it is important to have an agent that understands the industry, which is that's why I love that I've done so many different
Yes.
things, because if I don't know an area, I'll tell my client, look, I'm not that well versed in this. And it doesn't mean I can't find coverage for it, but I will say I will learn and I will find out. So you need an agent that is willing to stick to the areas they know well and that can help you find the right coverage. So Why is it important? Well, first of all, let's talk about what kind of coverages there are. You have equine mortality coverage, which covers the horse and your vet expenses for that horse. So that would be covering your investment in that horse, the purchase price of that horse, or over time as you develop the horse's skills and maybe you show them. We all know how much money that costs. Their value can increase with all of those costs. And so you want to protect that investment of that horse. And then again, you can also have your vet bills covered if there's medical emergencies, surgical emergencies, that kind of. And I can dive into that a little bit more, but there's equine mortality is one segment of insurance. Then you have equine liability. And there's a lot of different nuances to cover there, but the most basic thing to know about equine liability is where there is ownership, there is responsibility. So if you own a horse, you are responsible for whatever that horse may do to people or property and things. And if you own a training business, you are responsible for what those horses do to the people and the property and the things. So again, ownership equals responsibility. And equine liability does not mean everyone is covered. If your trainer has insurance and you own a horse at that boarding barn, that does not mean that you are personally covered because your trainer has insurance. That insurance covers your trainer. Again, it's linked to the ownership. So their policy protects them and their ownership of the business.
This is already, I have so many questions. Go ahead.
I try to make it really simple in that way.
No, I love
It is a complicated topic, but that's where I try to simplify it. And then you also have farm and ranch insurance. So that would cover the buildings, the property, as well as you can package that with liability. So those are kind of the three main segments of insurance coverage. Now, there are some different coverages underneath that as well. But again, you want to know that you have an agent who understands the industry, who understands what you do in the industry, because I will know to ask the right questions of, hang on, are those all your horses that you're teaching lessons on? Or did you borrow one from a friend? Who owns that horse? And who's getting on that horse for those lessons? Because we do a lot of the borrowing and switching and deal making, and that's not wrong, but you need to understand the liability risk that goes into all of those things. So again, having an agent that can make sure you're asking those questions is, to me, I think it's really important.
Yes, it is really important. Something that I learned, we had a 50-acre farm in Alpharetta and Georgia. And I always say it's everybody's dream to have a farm until they have a farm. Now I'm so happy to write the board checks. I'm like, here, thank you. Just make sure they have all four legs. But I learned, fortunately, we did not have anything catastrophic happen at the farm. But what I learned was everything is all good and we are all friends until something goes wrong. And I chose not to allow children. I didn't allow any lessons or it's just something that after talking with my agent, how much liability there is in having children on the property with horses and lessons and things like that. And it's true as a mom, it's all good until something happens. And then when something happens is when people suddenly aren't friends and they will come after you and all of those things. And I think that's important to have those conversations with your insurance agent to really understand what your liability is, because that, like you said, ownership brings responsibility. And I love that you said it that way, because that is such a simple way to understand. I also learned by having that farm when 3 of our horses got out, and thank God they were mine. They were not somebody else's. Not that I ever want that to happen, but it was like the 52 thoroughbreds post. The posts were all over about these 3. They were mine, and they were all over the place. These horses are out. Thank goodness a neighbor took them. But what I did not know until after the fact, I didn't realize that if one of my horses had caused an accident, that I would have been liable for that.
Yes.
And not as the farm owner, but as the owner of those horses. And, I've owned horses since I was 8 years old. Like no one ever told me that. I never knew that. I never knew that if my horse got out, even if my horse ran in front of somebody, even if it was the driver's fault, whatever, it's still my responsibility. So
Yeah.
that's something that, I hope that people will listen to and talk to somebody, talk to you, about that, because that's a big deal, right? I mean,
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think liability is one of the most misunderstood areas in insurance, especially in the horse world. Again, we do a lot of swapping and trading or we board our horse somewhere, so we think it's all their problem. And certainly they do have a responsibility, but yes, like wherever there's ownership, there is some level of responsibility.
well, I think
So,
people
yeah.
too think, like in Georgia, I don't have a farm here, so I don't even notice if these signs are up. I'm in Florida now. I haven't seen them, but everybody who had a farm, you had these signs and it said, under Georgia law, you accept responsibility
Mhm.
once you step on this property. But what I learned was that does not protect you, as it doesn't. Like if
Not
somebody wants
fully,
to, not
correct. Yeah.
fully, it does not. And that's why, because I know there are people that think like, oh, I have that, I don't need insurance. And that is not the case. Like that
That
is
is
a
definitely not the
right.
case. Yeah. And let me actually explain that because that's a great point. So every
Yeah.
state does have some equine laws, or I'm not calling it the right thing, but there are
Yeah.
laws that protect anyone involved with horses, but that is actually for participants. It's really meant to protect the people managing or owning the horses and anyone who willingly participates. There are laws that say, hey, you kind of knew what you were getting into
Yeah.
when you decided to go around a large animal, and you have to understand they're unpredictable and so on and so forth. So there is risk of injury in those cases. So that is for participants. Now, what about, as you mentioned, the horse that's running down the road? The person who's driving their car down that road in the middle of the night was not a willing participant. That's a third party that was not expecting for your horse to be running down the road, right?
Mhm.
So if they swerve and crash into a tree, that's the third party liability. So that's a very good point that those signs are just there as a precaution. And that
Mhm.
does mean that the law will lean towards, look, if you're a
Mhm.
willing participant, and especially if you signed that waiver, big shout out to getting waivers
Yeah.
signed and having a solid waiver written by an attorney. If they signed a waiver, they saw that sign posted at the barn, and then they still participated, yes, the law will lean towards, protecting the horse owner and the trainer, the business owner. But that does not mean if you were very negligent or you knew that there were warning signs. Again, when you get into the individual cases, you will see that those don't hold up 100%. So it's very important to still have all of your protections in place.
Yeah, it's a very detailed, fascinating subject. And once you start going down the rabbit hole, like there are so many different nuances to it. But basically, like people really just having this conversation, just opening it up, where somebody might go, oh, maybe I do need to look into that.
Yeah.
Switching gears a little bit to insuring a horse.
Yeah.
I've always been a huge advocate of insurance. And I think that I want to talk about the details of a competition horse versus a pleasure horse, or
Mhm.
I believe that insurance is for all horses, but I do want to talk about that. But I have a great scenario to share. I bought a horse for my daughter, and it was a $40,000 horse, and she was not going to do anything big. She was going to do some low level eventing, and there was I had been through a situation where I'd had a horse insured, and anyway, it did not go well because that insurance, I did not ask enough questions, and the horse did
Mhm.
not end up being covered for the injury that happened.
Oh,
So this
no.
time I asked a lot of questions, and we ended up insuring the horse. But what was kind of interesting, we went through the vetting, and so they opted not to insure. We had some findings in her hooves that were typical for Friesians. I can't remember the exact terminology. So they opted not to insure anything that would happen with the hooves. And I was like, okay,
They
that's
had an
fair.
exclusion. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's fair. Well, 3 years later, the horse ends up with kissing spine, had never shown any, no symptoms, nothing. Actually, was not even back sore when you palpated, was just
Mhm.
showing some really odd behaviors. And we went down all kinds of different avenues. She had ended up with ulcers and all the things. That insurance, that I can't remember what it cost me, it was pretty minimal. It saved us. I mean, we were able to pay for all of the scoping, for all of the ulcer guard, like everything that was included for ulcers. But what really was amazing is it paid for her kissing spine surgery. And
Wow. Yeah.
that was like, and she went through, she was an incredible case. She had 7 collapsed vertebrae, 7.
Oh my
And
gosh.
they ended, I mean, she was a saint. I mean, who knows how long that had been going on. And we removed 5 of the vertebrae, and she's off in Maryland now, fox hunting. She's happy, happy. But that insurance gave me decision making power. I was
Yeah.
able to make good decisions for the health of the horse. She was only 9, like she was a
Wow.
young horse, and she's living her best life now. She did not want to come back as a dressage horse. It wasn't where she wanted to be. I think there was some emotional stuff, which you probably would be great, would have been great to talk to. But she's happy with her head held high in the fox hunting. But anyway, that insurance, it was such a good decision. And
Mm.
like I said, it allowed me to make really good without having to worry about the finance part of it, because
Yeah.
it's not a hugely expensive surgery. However, the money that we had already spent on all the other
Right. The
things,
diagnostics. Yeah.
yeah, and getting
Mhm.
to that point. And then, but anyway, just talk a little bit about that. Like, she wasn't a high level competition horse. She wasn't a
Mm.
six-figure horse. I've also insured $20,000 horses and $10,000 horses. But just talk a little bit about that. Like, I obviously think that insurance is for all horses, but why would someone choose to not only, but to insure a particular horse and not another one?
Yeah, absolutely. You brought up so many good points, and I want to make sure I hit all of them. So let me kind of go from the outside in here. First of all, since the neat thing about being in insurance for at least 10 years is I've watched it evolve as, as a uh, as a service for the last 10 years. And when I first started, there were hardly any changes to rates or coverages at all. In the last 5 years, I have seen so many different changes to rates and coverages and, pinching here and pinching there. So a lot of different companies have found different ways of dealing with the costs that they're covering because they are paying out a lot of claims on vet bills. Now, the wonderful thing about that for the insureds and the clients is that, again, like you said, it gives you that decision-making power. Like, hey, we need to scope and we need to treat for ulcers. And, oh, that wasn't it. Okay, now we're going to try this. Now we're going to try this. That does add up so quickly. And having that insurance as a backup is a wonderful way to be able to move forward with those things and then find the actual problem for that
Mhm.
horse and then solve it. So I love that
Yeah.
story. That's what it's meant to be there for. Now, on the insurance company side, that means they're shelling out a lot of money
Right.
for claims because the way that works for them is that as veterinary medicine advances and as we can do more things for our horses, they're paying out for more and more, diagnostics or surgeries or treatments. So because of that, in order to keep the companies afloat, they're having to pinch coverage or raise rates or so on and so forth. So what I'm seeing from the outside, like the bigger picture, is that our veterinary medicine has advanced to a point where, like you said, that even your average horse is getting really great treatments
Yeah.
because it's available to them. And so the insurance is sometimes having to balance that out. I know there are some people who get frustrated, oh, this wasn't covered, that wasn't covered, or my $10,000 horse can't get medical coverage. Those things are tough because the insurance companies are having to balance out the scales to keep the companies open with all of these claims that they're paying out. So I just want to put that out there that the insurance is having to morph with the times a little bit.
Hmm.
But that does not mean it's not covering anything. So what's nice about an agency like Marshall and Sterling is that we offer coverage from 5, 6, 7 different companies, depending on what you're looking for. So I have some companies that just do farms and liability, some that do mortality, and some that do both. So what's nice about working with an agency is that when you come to me and say, hey, I just bought a horse for $10,000. I really want medical on it, but this other person told me I couldn't get it. I said, well, 4 of my companies won't offer you insurance with medical for a $10,000 horse, but one of them will. So I can quote one of those companies that may be the right fit. So that's what I like about working with an agency like Marshall and Sterling is I have multiple options to offer my clients. Um,
So can I
and
interrupt you for just a second?
yeah, go
So
ahead.
can you explain the difference between medical coverage and mortality?
Yes. Okay. So mortality covers the insured value of the horse. Now, the insured value of the horse is going to be when you first purchase them, it's going to be their purchase price. And I know that I'll just put in a plug here. There are definitely some cases where people will come to me and say, "Well, I only paid 10,000, but he's worth 50." He was put up for sale for 50 and we worked out a deal or it's my best friend or whatever. So I only paid 10. And the thing about insured value is, again, you are protecting the actual investment of that horse. So the actual cash investment that you made. Um, if you insured the value that's very subjective, then basically you're making that horse worth more dead than alive. So insurance companies don't want to do that.
Right. Right.
Don't want to
That
encourage
whole
that.
scandal from, yeah, decades ago. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I was say that happened in the 80s and the 90s, and things
Yeah.
didn't go so well for some horses. So they
Yeah.
kind of they nixed that. So um basically you're insuring your investment. So that means if you lose that horse, even if it was worth more, you really only lost the $10,000. Maybe you lost 10,000 in potential, but a lot of horses have potential, right?
Right.
And that's
Right.
not something you can really put down on paper. So
Now,
you
can
are,
you change? Sorry, but can you change? Like, okay, I insure a horse for 10,
yeah,
and now I've put all this training in. He's got this
yep,
track record. So I can come back to you and say, hey, I
yep.
want to reinsure this horse for 25, whatever. Okay.
Exactly. That
Okay.
happens. That happens a lot. And in fact, as you do show the horse or put training into them, any kind of educational development on that horse that costs you money, absolutely, you should make sure that that gets added to your insured value. And that's where, again, working with an agent who knows your segment of the industry is really important because if someone comes to me and says, "Hey, I have a first level dressage horse now," it started out as 30 days under saddle and now they're
Yeah.
showing first level, then I can go, okay, well, we can go to the company and ask for, this range. And the companies will always decide if they want to insure that horse for that range. But what I do as an agent is I collect the data from the client and say, hey, let's get the show records. And didn't you go to that clinic last month with that Olympic trainer? And aren't you doing this, this, and that? And we share all of that educational information with the company so they can make the most informed decision on that value. So that's what mortality is covering is that base value of the horse.
But
Um,
that does not cover when if, because I know that this was an option. If you, and I don't like the word only because it's still a big deal, but if you choose mortality,
mhm.
that is not going to cover your vet bills. That is not
Not
going,
at
you
all.
can't go back and say, oh, I should have, or like, that's it.
Yeah, it
Right.
is just it's just ensuring. So I guess the easiest way to put it is mortality is death, right? So you're
Yeah.
covering the loss of that horse. That would include veterinary recommended euthanasia. So if the vet is recommending euthanasia, your mortality policy should cover that. There are some nuances in there as well,
Sure.
but generally speaking, if the vet's recommending it, yes, the insurance companies don't question the vet recommendations. And then the other thing is actually theft. It also covers theft. So
Oh.
if your horse is stolen and you can't find them or so on, they could pay out a claim for theft as well. But that is it. There's no vet bills, no training, no board, none of that obviously is covered, but none of your other expenses are covered. Is just the loss of that horse.
So if someone chooses medical, and I know that's more expensive,
Hmm.
right? So it's just really like human insurance, right? The more you pay in, like
Yeah. Yeah.
you're going to get
So
those benefits.
medical and surgical or really any other coverage is always an add-on to the
Okay.
mortality. So the
Yeah.
mortality is your base policy, and then you can add on medical, surgical. There's all kinds of varieties of coverage now. Again, the companies have all gotten really creative with how they're offering and packaging those services. But that would be so medical and surgical generally speaking, covers injury, illness, disease, those kind of things for your vet bills, diagnostics, treatment, and that kind of thing. Again, that's all nuanced to how they package it. So again, work with an agent on
Yeah.
figuring out what package you're buying, what it includes, what deductibles and copays and all of that are involved because they all have basically a ton of small print now. But it
Yeah.
can offer good coverage. Yeah.
So when I asked you, like, I mean, I know the answer to this, but I mean, you feel like I feel like all horses should be covered. Like, even if it's, I mean, we had some horses that didn't do, they ended up, they didn't do much. They were just family
Mhm.
horses, but they were still insured.
I
It
mean,
just
the
gives
answer to
me to
that,
keep in mind.
it's not so much for me, it's not so much about the horse and what they do. It's actually
Okay.
about the owner.
Okay.
So if the owner is willing to put in the money or have a savings account, then they
Yeah.
don't need insurance. If they're willing to take the loss of what they purchased the horse for, they don't need insurance. But they just have to realize that that loss is possible or that responsibility of, do I have to come up with the money for surgery if I really want to save this horse's life?
Right.
I do know there are some situations where putting a horse down is the right decision. So I will never say that you should always, always this or always that. And what I will say, this has been a tricky situation. So one recommendation that I always make is if you get a mortality policy, at least get surgical coverage. If you don't want to pay for medical coverage, that's fine. But either be willing to pay for a surgery to save that horse's life or get surgical coverage, which is usually really affordable. Most
Yeah.
surgical coverage as an add-on only adds 150 or 200 of premium to the entire year.
Oh, wow.
So
Yeah.
that's worth it. No matter what you're paying for the mortality, at least be willing to cover a surgery or pay for the surgical coverage because if that vet is saying, hey, this is a really bad colic, I think we need to do a surgery to save their life. I don't want to put them down, but I want to do surgery. Your mortality coverage will actually require that you do the surgery in order to
Okay.
pay out on a claim, even if you lose the horse. They will
Okay.
require the attempt
Wow.
to save the life if the vet is saying, I think we can save their life with a surgery. So
That's
that is
really
why,
good information.
yeah, I always say at least get surgical. It's not that much more, and then you don't have to make that horrible decision in the moment based on your personal finances.
Yeah. Which I
It
think that's
will,
just the toughest thing because and
yeah,
it's just the reality of horses. I mean, we've all made terrible financial decisions with horses in
yeah,
different ways, but being in that moment of having to make that decision and not have that comfort
yeah.
of some padding is tough. I think I remember, I don't know if I don't think I'm making this up. I think there used to be like insurance for career ending, like if the horse's career
Mm,
was ended, you
yeah.
that's no longer, right? And I don't know what that's
So
called, but
it's never been a great coverage. I'll just be honest. So that's
yeah,
called loss of use. So
loss of
many
use.
people will call me and say, I want loss of use or I want the career ending coverage. And I understand why they want that. We all want that.
Right.
But we also all want a, crystal ball that tells us the
Right.
future. That's just getting insurance doesn't mean it won't happen.
Right.
I do understand wanting that, but what insurance companies let me just go quick into what that coverage meant. Loss of use was coverage for if you bought a very expensive horse to do a certain job and then they became lame and they can't do the job anymore, but not lame enough to put them down
Right.
so they could have a serviceable life or even just a pasture life. And so what it would do is would pay out a certain percentage of that horse's value. Now, usually those were pretty high values for people paying for that coverage. What got weird though is in those claim situations, when you pay out a loss of use, you basically have to agree to surrender that horse to the company and they can either rehome them, retire them
Oh,
or
wow.
whatever. Now that doesn't mean they always kept them, but a lot that's kind of was written into some of the contracts of how it worked. And that's a weird thing to do, first of all. Most people
Right.
want to retire their own. And then also
Wait,
if
can I just ask you, like, so then like Marshall and Sterling has a barn where these horses are coming? Like,
no,
how
no, not at all. No, and it wasn't Marshall and Sterling, it was the
yeah.
companies, the carriers. But what they would
Okay.
do is they would assume ownership and then basically rehome the horse somewhere. Again,
Okay.
this was kind of
Yeah,
in
a
the
long time
past, and
ago.
it was a
Yeah.
weird, it's a
Yeah.
really weird thing. Now, if people were allowed or opted to keep the animal, sometimes they took a year off, they healed, they started rehabbing, and then all of a
Uh,
sudden they could do the job again. And then the claim was like, wait a second, this horse wasn't supposed to be able to do this job again, but
yeah.
now it is. So, and that's not to say people were lying. That's just the magic of rehab and time
Right.
and all of that. It just became a really hard coverage to manage the claims on, and also the carriers started making it very expensive. So it was only six-figure horses, and it had to be this much. And by the time you're up in those levels, which it might be worth paying that coverage at those
Right.
levels, it's so expensive that honestly, the people paying into those kind of horses and that level of insurance and all of that are probably okay taking the hit and taking the risk. It's usually the horse owners that have their one single horse and they're never going to rehome them that really want that coverage. And I think
Yeah.
it's more of an emotional thing that they want
Yeah.
it. Like,
Sure.
this is my one horse and I don't want them to ever, this is my one shot at reaching, whatever
Right.
level. Or so usually the people who want it the most are the ones who either are not eligible or can't afford it anyway,
You
because it
can
would add
see though how
thousands.
well how that could have been taken advantage of. I mean, and it does
Yeah, yeah.
make that
It's and
part not
it's
to
even if
exist.
people were being honest, it's just such a difficult thing
Yeah.
to know, is that horse really done forever or did they just
Yeah.
need a real break? And, I don't know. So
It's
it's
interesting.
it was a really difficult one. It still exists, but it's usually for six-figure horses, and it's very expensive, and you only get like 50% back anyway or something like that. So
Yeah.
it just became this really weird coverage. Your average horse owner basically is not going to be eligible or even need it, in my
Yeah.
opinion. Because when you quote the price of like, oh yeah, that'll add $3,000 to your premium, they're like, wait, a year? Like, yeah.
Yeah. Then
Like
it
you
starts to get up there. So, what would you say is the most rewarding thing about what you do?
For me, honestly, it's becoming part of that owner's journey with their horse. And I hate to say it because a lot of times that journey involves like a claim or an issue that they have to overcome. That's usually where I get brought in is when there's a problem. But what's nice about it is that I can offer that reassurance. I can be a part of that emotional journey for them
Yeah.
and offer support. And I love being able to tell someone, yes, your coverage will help you. And then, like you said, with your story, you
Yeah.
can make those decisions that will eventually bring that horse to a happy ending. I love that.
Yeah.
And help them get through this problem. So I kind of come in at the hardest point a lot of times. But what I love about it is watching people apply their coverage and overcome the problem and then have many more years of, great, great times with their horse. Or I also get to be a part of new purchases. That's so exciting when
Yeah.
someone that's everyone's favorite part, right? Like
Yeah.
buying a new horse. I just got a new horse. I'm so excited. So I like being a part of the journey year after year after year and following my clients, watching them move up the levels, hearing about their achievements that year. And, yes, I'm kind of working on like the mechanical, boring insurance side, but it's connected me to people on this really fun and emotional level, that the work itself doesn't do that, but me working with the people has done that. So that's what I love about it is connecting with people in that way. And I mean, I've had clients that have been with me for almost the whole 10 years I've been doing this. In fact, one of my clients started out a business with little up down ponies doing hunter jumpers. And we went to college together. She started a business and it was like she was renting some space in a barn and had a couple ponies and did all that. And she like moved to a new facility and her business grew. And then she started a small show series. And, now she just got to buy this huge farm that's this huge facility where she will run her show series. Watching that progression of her business has been so rewarding and so fun for me. And I get to say that I'm a part of it in this tiny way.
Great. I love
So
that.
that part's really great for me. Yeah.
So how would someone get in touch with you, and where do you cover the entire United States? Are you specific to location? Just share that with us.
Sure. So I live and work out of the Lexington, Kentucky area, but Marshall and Sterling can offer coverage in all of the 50 United States. And actually, if we have clients who fly overseas or import horses, we also can do temporary coverage for horses internationally as well. So I do a lot of that if anyone's importing or they're flying over for some championship and coming back. So yeah, my coverage can include all of that, which is great. To get in touch with me, I actually don't market myself very well. I have to admit that. I've kind of run off of referrals for the last 10 years. So I guess I can put out my cell phone number, and then I have an email for my insurance as well. I don't know if that's easier to just put in the text, but my email is equine insurance, all one word, @gmail.com.
Okay. Yeah, that's great. And then I'll put that in the show notes as well. So thank you. Thank you for this. I mean, you actually made a subject that is not very much fun to talk about, very entertaining. So, I mean, it's something that everybody does need to be talking about, and it's not fun to talk about mortality and those kinds of things, but it is important, as part of, like you said, ownership brings responsibility, and that is part of our responsibility. So thank you for being on today, and we will see you soon on Main Street Minute. Thanks, y'all.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed today's episode, please let us know. Email support@mainstreetmarket.com. Please share and join us again next week for another episode of the Main Street Minute, right here on the Equus Radio Network.